Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22 to 36. I played around with the translation myself and added a few different from a variety of sources so you can follow along, but it might be a little different than what's in your Pew Bible. This is one of those texts where wisdom is personified. In this case, she's actually speaking. And so it starts and says, "The Lord created me at the beginning of God's way, before God's deeds long in the past. I was formed in ancient times, at the beginning, before the earth was. When there were no watery depths, I was brought forth, when there was no springs flowing with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before God made the earth and the fields, or the first of the dry land. I was there when God established the heavens, when God marked out the horizon on the deep sea, when God thickened clouds above, when God secured the fountains of the deep, when God set a limit for the sea so the water couldn't go beyond God's command, when God marked out the earth's foundations. I was beside God as a master of crafts. I was having fun, smiling before God all the time, frolicking with God's inhabited earth and delighting in the human race. Now, children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Listen to instruction and be wise. Don't avoid it. Happy are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorposts. Those who find me find life. They gain favor from the Lord. Those who offend me injure themselves. All those who hate me love death." And our second text today comes from Luke chapter 8. Beginning in verse 22 to 25, a story that we all know more familiarly. One day, Jesus got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, "Let's go across to the other side of the lake." So they set out. And as they sailed, Jesus fell asleep, and a storm of wind came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in danger. And they went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're perishing." And he awoke and rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and they ceased, and there was calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" And they were afraid, and they marveled, saying to one another, "Who then is this, that he commands even wind and water, and it obeys him?" The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A few weeks ago, my stepmother, Jean, and my daughter-in-law, Faith, and I were swimming with my granddaughter, Julia. Julia is almost 6. She's just finished kindergarten, and she is constantly making up games to play. And so we're bobbing around in the water, leisurely moving from corner to corner of the pool as me and these other two women are talking. And Julia is continually interrupting us with new games. And so here is one, to give you an idea. She says, "Let's play mermaids. My name will be Emerald. What's your name? Wait, she quickly adds. Your name has to be a color from your bathing suit." And so we each figure out that one will be named Coral, and the other will be named Ruby, and I'm wearing only black and white, and so I say, "My name will be Onyx." And Julia looks at me cautiously because she doesn't know that word. She says, "What is onyx?" I say it's a black-colored precious stone, like emerald is a green-colored precious stone, I say. She says. "Okay, you can be oxen." I say, "No, onyx. It's spelled O-N-Y-X. So she tries it out, onyx. "Okay, you can be onyx." And now, how old do you want to be? Wait, wait, wait. Now, you see, when you're almost 6, one of the most important defining questions available to you is how old are you, right? The second most defining question is how many teeth have you lost, right? And so she asks us to be mermaids. How old are we going to be? But again, before we can answer, she quickly says, I'm going to be 8. You can be 6 or 7. Or you can be 6.5 or 7.5. Whatever you want. Whatever I want. As long as it's within this strict parameter, right? Whatever we want. So this is how every game she plays goes. I'm not exaggerating. She starts out with the widest idea. Let's play mermaids, right? It's so wide open. The creative possibilities that extend way beyond our actual reality is the game. And then in her playfulness, she limits the thing from wide open to what is reasonable in her eyes, right? What is your name and how old will you be? This is play at work, or work at play, whichever. So Proverbs 8 describes wisdom, or Sophia, we've been talking about, or in Hebrew the word is chokmah, as the creative, artistic, and playful aspect of divinity. God's creativity at work, or at play, or at work at play. Now, way before the book of Proverbs was written, there is a picture of God exactly like this in Hinduism. In Hinduism, the play of God is actually personified in a person called Leela. I find that actually really helpful in our increasingly pluralistic world, right? Particularly in our context of Central Jersey, and even more particularly in our context of South Brunswick, right? Where we are surrounded by our neighbors that are Hindu. We are surrounded by people who also have been raised with very different backgrounds, but somehow still have a similar picture of divinity, Leela or Sophia, this wisdom and playful act of God at work, at play, at work, creating. So when play creates, there's a rhythm to it or a rhyme to it. There's an order to it, even in the chaos. Mermaids, what's your name? Right? There's some order to it. When play creates, it begins with this large idea, and then it quickly narrows it to make sense of it all. So in Hinduism, this idea of play as the creator is called Leela. And Leela is the Sanskrit word loosely defined as play. Leela is a way of describing all reality as the outcome of creative play of God. Everything that we can see and imagine is the result of God at play. In Christian mysticism, we call that ludus amoris. It's a Latin term, so it's way after Hinduism and way after the book of Proverbs. The Christian mystics refer to it as ludus amoris, which is a term that refers to the play of God, but is translated more accurately, the game of love. That's what Proverbs is describing in chapter 8, the game of love, the creative play of God. In chapter 8, wisdom describes herself as beside God at creation, like a master craftsman or like a little child. There's play happening at the creation of the world. This wisdom, this playful child or this master craftsman is the creative power of God embedded in everything. In you, in me, in Lucia, since everyone's so intrigued by her right now, including me. We have this great example of this fantastic playful piece of art of God moving from parent to parent there. Right? The playful act of God, this playful creative power of God, we see in the trees outside with their green waving leaves, right? And then the strong branches that hold the leaves and then also hold the mourning dove that we hear almost every day, most of us. And the dove sitting underneath cumulus clouds, God's work at play. This wisdom, this playful child or the master craftsman, is the creative power of God embedded in everything. The playful work of God is in the ladybug and the lizard who would eat her. Or the playful work of God is in the raccoon who reached into the chicken coop 2 weeks ago and killed one of our chickens. You see, as much as the playful work of God is about designing the beauty of the natural world, it's also about setting order and limits. The playful work of God at creation is as much about color as it is about scope, as much about texture as it is about tethering all of those textures one to another. So take, for example, the one line from our text today. Wisdom says, I was there when God set a limit for the sea so that the water couldn't go beyond God's command. My mom used to quote it horribly wrong, but much more beautifully. I tried to look for a translation. I don't know who taught her, but it said, she used to say, I was there to tell your mighty waters where they stop. Right? We all know that, being from the shore, but close to the ocean. The task of creation was to fashion the vast sea, right? And the inhabitants of all of its ecosystem. At creation, God set the depths of the sea with its sandy floor, rolling with plankton and vegetation. At creation, God poured the salty water into this vast pond with God's creative play in motion, and the waves began to tumble toward the shore. And then there it is, God's creative play had to determine when would the water stop, when would the shore begin. When will the waves cease? What is the limit to the sea? What is the limit to the shoreline? Now, I don't want to be accused of having bad science in my sermon, so let's talk a little bit about waves of the sea. Waves are actually energy. They're not water. Energy, not water. Energy moves across the ocean's surface, and the water particles actually only travel in small circles as a wave of energy passes. A wave's size and shape reveals where its origins come from. A steep, choppy wave out at sea is fairly young and was probably formed by a local storm. Slow and steady waves near the shore, which have crests and then plunge into foam, the ones that we know, are actually from far, far away, perhaps even from another hemisphere. So where does the energy come from, right? As best as I could tell from my research, that energy is from the pull of the moon and the sun, right? The moon's gravity pulls at us, at the earth, and it creates a tidal bulge. And the change in the water the change of that tidal bulge starts the water in a rift, right? A rift, like if I was holding a rope and I gave it a tug, right? It would create a rift. So we have the pull and then the rift that eventually reaches New Jersey and crashes. The beauty and vastness of the ocean is as much about the creative and playful ecosystem as it is about how that ecosystem is tethered to the things around it, like the moon or the sand or the coastline. The playful work of God at creation is as much about color as it is about scope. It's as much about texture as it is about tethering all of those textures one to another. To create is also to order. And so we, being made in the image of God, we have been given the job of naming the animals, so it says in Genesis 2. We were given the job of tending to the earth. We can say that we can say also that we've been given the job of creative play then, if we are creating these things. We go about defining limits and scopes and rules and order in our own lives. And when we don't do that, when we don't define the correct limit or scope or rule or order, we feel stress or we experience unrest. When we haven't defined the appropriate rules, our community doesn't live in harmony together. If we don't set limits, we burn out, or we lose sight of what's important. Wisdom sets limits. Right? Do you want to play mermaids? What will your name be? How old do you want to be? You can be 6 or 7, or 6.5 or 7.5, right? But wisdom sets limits. Wisdom can also seem very bossy. Our world in the 21st century can seem exhaustive in its possibilities, right? The world that we live in seems to be, yes, like the world is my oyster, particularly for those of us who live with tremendous resources, with tremendous freedoms. We have more resources available to us in any given day than we could possibly use. Many of us can start each day with almost limitless possibilities. But wisdom sets limits. Wisdom sets limits on what our bodies do, on what our minds spend time thinking about, on how we relate to one another. Wisdom sets limits on our spending, on our giving, on our taking, on our working, on our playing, on our resting. Wisdom sets limits. Wisdom defines. Wisdom orders. And so what in your life needs limits today, this week, this month? What is it that needs to be ordered because wisdom is demanding it? We can ignore wisdom. We're pretty good at that sometimes. What needs to be defined or ordered or tethered? What is the wisdom limit that you need? And so on your origami sheet, I ask you to write in what in your life needs wisdom. What is it that needs limiting, that needs defining? How would wisdom playfully create your life with limits? So I invite you to make that your prayer. And you can try to make it into a butterfly. You can bring it to fellowship time. We will make them together. As you see, we're collecting them up front each week during this series. And so as the band plays, let's reflect on how wisdom would want us to set limits in our life.